Hello, everyone out there. We want to welcome you to our weekly webinar series that we have. Thank you for joining us. Today is honestly one that has generated a lot of excitement, not only in-house, but in the community, because with the shelter-in-place order that we've all been living under, we know the impacts that it has on us as adults and as the primary caretakers, or as program developers or directors in our agencies and in our school systems. We have a finger on the pulse of the typical teen issues, but honestly, now with the pandemic and the shelter in place, the isolation that is taking place has taken it to a whole new level. So we have brought in a panel of experts that I couldn't be more thrilled about, and they're going to just be bouncing from one to the other. So let me just tell you the general format. After I give the short introductions, then they're going to take it off and they're going to go ahead and tell you their little point of expertise and start uncovering some of the issues that we're dealing with, and hopefully some solutions as well. And then we're going to have a time at the end for questions and answers. So feel free at any time during the presentation to go ahead and type your questions in the chat box. We will not be pulling questions. If you are on Zoom, we're not going to be tapping into the Q&A box. So go ahead and pull up your chat box. Make sure that it's live for panelists and attendees. So you're going to make that selection. And as those populate, I'll go ahead and be writing them down. We're not going to be asking the questions right after the presenter. We're going to be doing that after all of the presentations. As far as those who have joined us on Facebook Live, feel free to post your questions in the comment section. We do have someone there that's going to be actually exporting them over to me, and then that way that I can go ahead and ask the panelists at the end. You can ask a particular panelist a question or just a broad question, and then we can just kind of popcorn it with our panelists. So that being said, I don't want to take up any more of the time. Let me go ahead and share with you the treasure trove that we have in store for you. So the first two that I'd like to introduce is Yanira and Andrew. They are both part of the education department at Laura's House. They happen to be colleagues of mine as well. If you want to talk to a couple people who have their finger on the pulse of teen issues, this is them. They are in classrooms, or used to be. Now they're going via Zoom into classrooms. So they have stories, they have firsthand accounts of what they're seeing, and then whether teen relationships and also the social issues that all teens face. And so they're going to share a little bit about their expertise and some of the resources that are out there as well. And then we're going to pull in a couple young adults that are also very familiar with Laura's House. The first one is going to be Ava Shakib. She's an advisor of HEART, which is our Healthy Emotions and Attitudes in Relationships Today. It is a club that we have on various campuses, and she's the advisor of that club at UCI. Ava shares relationship and health and sexual health education via Instagram, and a podcast that she hosts called Sex Talk and Love Talk. And then we have May Razzo. She's a fourth-year student at UCI, and she strives to work with youth and the development of youth, especially within the low-income communities, and not only with the youth, but with their families. And then we're going to wrap this up with Kimberly Hernandez, who currently is with Western Youth Services. That's one of our partner organizations at Laura's House. We love them. She has 10 years of experience working as a bilingual parent partner. Currently, she is working for a behavioral health intervention service with Western Youth Services, assisting parents with anything from basic needs to assistance with resources to help with social and emotional learning. She also happens to be a grandma of 5 grandchildren, so she has a lot of experience. So with that, without further ado, Yanira, I'm going to ping pong it over to you.
Great, thank you so much. I appreciate the introduction. Thank you, Veronica. And I appreciate everyone here joining us. I know that in particular, we developed this conversation because we recognize there are several groups are impacted differently due to COVID-19. So our youth in particular face challenges with the stay-at-home order. First off, it's important to understand that our youth and our young adults are in a critical point in their lives in which they're forming their identity. In this group, a lot of their identity is associated with their peers and their peer groups. This can be in contrast, for instance, with children. Children associate more their identity with their family and their household and people in their household. So with our youth and our young adults, since we see them, they're forming their identity in this way that they're being isolated. And so a part of their identity is actually being taken away during this. And a consequence to that is actually that some of them aren't in quarantine and some of them are meeting up with friends, which clearly puts their health at risk too. In regards to schooling, there's difficulty in learning, which can cause them to feel like they're coming behind on their academics, and they may also feel loss in motivation. Some students are not going into class or they're not participating into their virtual classrooms. The social aspects of schooling is another important thing too. These aspects can include sporting events, dances, graduations, and other end of the year activities that aren't happening anymore. And these are events that a lot of students look forward to. And this truly feels like a loss for them, and they're processing it as such. And currently we're not aware of how schools are going to look like in the fall, which that unknown in itself could add another stressor right now. And, ultimately school is everything for students. They spend a lot of their time at school or doing after school extracurricular activities. And so if something's wrong with their schooling, it may have an impact and disrupt them as a whole. Now we have students also facing all of this, in addition to possibly being in an unhealthy or abusive relationship. If they are in isolation, they may be facing heightened cyber and digital abuse. They feel isolated from that support group that they normally would have, maybe connecting with friends and such, and feeling comfortable in talking to them more in person than they might online, which they might have to do now. And I can't stress enough really the importance of supporting our students. They may be facing their own challenges, but they may also bear witness to a lot of the challenges that their families and their communities are facing as well. And they might feel helpless. But however, I have confidence in our students. I know that they are strong. And as a community, I really do believe that we can continue to support one another and hopefully, again, be there for each other as much as we can be. And I know Andrew is going to talk more about the impacts and the effects in their emotional well-being. Thank you.
Thanks, Yanira. And I will mirror a lot of what you said, and also thank you all for joining us as well. So we are, obviously experiencing a lot of new challenges presenting themselves for our young people. With COVID-19, we see how this is impacting a lot of people's ability to practice self-care even. So I'm going to talk about self-care in three different ways right now. So first off, talking about obviously the mental health aspect. A lot of people, like Yanira was mentioning, are lacking that support from friends, right, and from family members even. And for a lot of people who have, I'm not sure if our audience have heard of the different love languages, but this is definitely something that is definitely impacting people and expressing that love and gratitude and receiving that and giving that type of support. So people who might really long for that physical contact with peers or with their family members, or quality time even being an aspect of that love language that they're not really able to express, can really hinder people's ability to receive that support that they're wanting, where they're longing for that type of support. And we see this with physical health, and Yanira talked about sports, right, having these extracurricular activities, so not being able to engage in those different activities, going to the gym if that's something that really was a motivator to for self-care, and being able to really to do something active, or it's potentially even hard to do or to practice healthy eating habits, right? Because it might be more easy for folks to go to a fast food place rather than because of stressors of going to the grocery store and having that stressor of getting or being contaminated with the virus. think it's safer to go to a drive-through, right? So, and then also cultural wellness is something that we should be considering as well, because, we're looking at, people having not spent, right, at this point, more than 2 months with family members, right? We're almost at the 3-month point where people are not being able to spend that time with family members in the way that, was easier, the way that's preferred. And it might be more difficult for more cultural or traditional practices that a family or a community practice or engage with. And now technology makes it really hard to practice this wellness stuff, because a lot of folks, if not most or a majority of people, are on their phones, and while that might be the only form of entertainment or the only way to receive mental health, right? Mental health support services, whether it's therapy sessions, telehealth, seeking resources from the community, or talking with friends online. You're still on your phone, and it could also have negative effects, especially if one of the things that you're doing often is looking at the news, and being really overwhelmed with the things that you're seeing online, seeing all the harassment, all of the oppression that people are experiencing during this time. Is also really damaging to people's mental health, especially if you identify with a marginalized community. And like Yanira was also alluding to, in terms of people who are in abusive relationships, one other aspect, that often happens, right, if someone is in an abusive relationship, and also mentioned people are, one aspect that can happen is, this kind of fatigue of being home alone, and people wanting to go outside, people wanting to hang out with their friends because they're like, I'm so bored. And it could be really damaging for people who are really trying to practice social distancing and trying to practice community care by making sure that the community is safe. But then if they have an abusive partner that's like, well, don't you love me? If you cared about me, you would spend time with me. You're taking it too seriously. I'm more important, right? And this can have some really damaging effects on our youth, right, and people that are just in abusive relationships in general. And we see these challenges really heighten in terms of people with identities at the margins. So, for example, people who are queer, people who are in LGBTQIA+ relationships, where it might be challenging to even seek support, for example, because if you're at home in a situation where you're with your family, and this family is not aware of your identity and isn't aware of this relationship in general, it might be challenging to seek that support from your family members, and not have really the support that you're looking for, because your friends are far away. It's hard to really communicate such an extreme type of thing with your family members if they're not accepting of it. And it's, this can also go for family who have more traditional or cultural beliefs or practices, religious beliefs or practices, that might hinder someone's kind of feeling of support and feeling of being able to express themselves and seek that or to be vulnerable and to really seek some sort of compassion or empathy, can be really challenging for them. And in terms of, some of the ways that we can probably potentially mitigate this is, we have our chat line that is available for folks that are wanting to get connected, for people who might not be, surrounded by people who are not as empathetic or supportive in what's currently going on, and they want to speak to an advocate. That we have our chat line that people can reach out to. All of our services at Laura's House are still being offered, things like therapy, counseling. Our hotline is still open. A variety of different services that we are offering. So if that's something that people are interested in looking into, you can visit us on our website to kind of look at the different services that we offer. And the one that I really want to highlight is our chat line, because it is definitely a more accessible, or all of our our services are accessible, but this one in particular, especially with our teens, because this is a number that folks can text to get connected with an advocate, to hopefully get them connected to services and support services to accommodate their needs, especially given this time. So now I'm going to share the mic with May and Ava, who are going to share with you a little bit about their experiences and perspectives on how youth are being impacted during this time.
Thanks, Andrew. for that, and Yanira. I feel like the things that I'm going to be saying, some of them are going to be going on top of what you've already shared. I do have slides, more like visuals, that I'd prefer to show. So I'm going to share my screen right now, and hopefully it's going to work. Let's see, share. Can you see my screen? Yeah? And is it full screen? Let's see. Okay, yeah, cool. Okay, so I'm Ava, and as you heard, I'm the advisor of Heart at UCI, and I'm just really all about relationship and sexual health education. So I'm super excited to be here to talk about how we can support youth in the community. And when I say youth, I mean preteens, teens, and young adults. So from like 12 to 22, maybe even a little more. That whole gap is what I'm talking about when I say youth throughout this. So I'm going to share my experience, the experiences of youth in our community. I'm going to talk about the range of uncomfortable to unsafe homes during shelter in place, and also how can we support our youth. Okay. Hopefully my screen is showing up correctly for you. I hope it is. If not, you hear my voice. So first of all, my experience. I'm very grateful to say that I feel safe and secure at the home that I'm in. I'm with my family, and I do feel safe and secure with them, which isn't everyone's case. But of course, even though it's a healthy environment, feelings still come up for me about sheltering in place with my family. A lot of it comes from the fact that usually I'm not this available. I'm at home all the time, all day, every day, basically. And so I find myself in conversations and in situations with my family that I don't particularly want to be in. I have many more opportunities to be around my family, and it's mixing up that work mode and hangout mode. So let's say I'm working and I go downstairs into the kitchen to cook my food. I allotted like 45 minutes for lunch. During that time, a family member might come and start just talking with me as if we're hanging out. And we don't have that clear boundary of like, oh no, I'm actually like on the clock right now, you know? So we have those types of issues of just being in situations that we don't really want to be in the household. And again, my situations are still safe and secure and healthy, but it's still just this thing that wasn't happening before, and I can't really escape it other than increasing my communication with my family, which I'll talk about later. So now we have youth in our communities who aren't me, who are experiencing unhealthy romantic relationships and unhealthy family relationships during these times. What I'm going to talk about has more to do with family relationships in the home and navigating that. We have individuals who are living in abusive, unhealthy, or unpredictable homes. And I want to acknowledge that there's a range, there's a spectrum of unhealthy homes. So it can be an uncomfortable house. Maybe the parents are separated, but living in the same home. And now me, the child, with both my parents who don't really even like each other, we're all in the same place all the time. That can create tension. It's not necessarily abuse, but it's still this stressful, uncomfortable situation that we see our youth in. And then, of course, there's a more intense side of that where it is actual abuse happening between family members in the household. And no matter where you are on that range or spectrum, whether it's just uncomfortable or if it's abusive, we all seek safety and comfort in our safe places. And we see youth who, you know, maybe it's their neighbor's house or their friend's house. Maybe it's their extracurricular activity or their school that would keep them busy and would give them space away from this uncomfortable situation. It gave them space away from their abusers if their abusers live at home. And so now we're lacking that. We don't have that safe, comfortable, calm place that sometimes we just really want to run away to. And it makes me think about, you know, stories I've heard individuals sharing with me, their upbringing as a child, and how, you know, they were never home. They would sleep at home, but if they were awake, they were not at home. They were at school or their neighbor's house, right? And we have youth all over the place who have that same exact situation, but now those options are no longer there for them. And so now no longer is this these outside safe places, not only are they not available anymore, but we also have this increase in stress due to the situation that's going on around us. And we know that stress can escalate unhealthy, abusive behaviors that happen in the home. So abusive, manipulative behaviors that happen usually always have to do with that person getting power and control over the person. During these times, we have income stress, we have stress due to the uncertainty of the future. And all of this, you know, makes us feel like we're losing power and control. And some people let that out in abusive, very harmful and hurtful ways. So it's really created, this whole COVID thing is creating this environment that's accentuating some of the scary parts of people's lives. So there's many opportunities now for that power and control to be taken over in the household. So shelter in place, we call it. Some people, where they normally seek shelter, that's not available to them anymore. Their home is not their shelter. So it's important to take those people into consideration, and also to know it's at a spectrum. You know, my feelings about shelter in place are still valid, even though other people have it worse, right? We're not comparing ourselves. We're just hearing each other's experiences and having empathy and reaching out to help people and provide resources and conversations with them. And again, so this conversation has to do with family relationships. There's a lot to say about romantic relationships, one of which being that, and I believe Andrew mentioned this, how abusive and unhealthy relationships can come onto the internet now. Just because someone who's in a romantic relationship isn't seeing them anymore, they may be experiencing new types or even more of this type of cyber abuse online. That's this whole other thing to get into, which I'm gonna, I wanted to focus more on those family dynamics. So what can we do to support our youth? There's a lot. There's one aspect I'm gonna focus on. And before I go into that, I want to bring up parent-child dynamics and how in a parent-child dynamic, no matter the age of the child, even if the child's 35 years old, right? There's this normalization of the parent taking the lead, right? The parent's role in this parent-child relationship is to know what to do and know how to handle situations. So I invite you, if you're a parent who's having conflict that has to do with this isolation, if you're having trouble talking with your kids, schedule time together to spend time with your kids. You initiate the conversation of reaching out and connecting with your child if you feel that there is an issue. I know that they can easily be feeling the same way, but someone needs to be the one to initiate the conversation, whether it be about their mental health, whether it be about the health of their relationship, really anything. As the parent, I know as a child, I expect and want my parent to initiate these conversations. So I think it's important for parents to try to do that. And I understand it's difficult. My slide is loading. Here you go. I understand that it's difficult to have these conversations, and Laura's house has amazing resources. Andrew talked about the 24-hour hotline and the texting heart chat for any resources that you need. There's an amazing 3-session series called the Healthy Family series that Laura's house puts on. There's 3 sessions in May. I just finished their one from last month, and it was so good. No issue is too big or too small to seek these resources, right? So it's not like your situation's too intense or not intense enough to do this free series or to use the hotline. It's open for everyone. Now, again, slide isn't loading, so we'll skip on to the next one. What that slide would have said is that, actually, Andrew brought up social media and how it's always around us. So I invite us to take this as an opportunity to use social media for the better, right? So I have Instagram, and I kind of went through everyone that I followed. So I make sure that the people that I'm following, what's on my newsfeed, is information that I want to receive at almost all times, because my phone is always with me, right? We can learn about how to have these different types of conversations by following social media accounts and educating ourselves. Whether, like, if I'm a parent, I can follow people online who give information on how to support your kids in different types of conversations. And then you can recommend these accounts to your youth too. You know, it's important to surround ourselves with these healthy relationships. And it's a great way to spark conversation, right? So you can go to your kid and be like, I saw this online, or I listened to this webinar, and it talked about how it asked the question, what is one thing about yourself that you're in love with, right? And you can start that conversation with your kid by, you know, mentioning this thing you found, or here I have a screenshot, hopefully you can see it, of an Instagram account called The Growth Arc. They have an MA, a master's in human development, and talk about relationship skills and communication. So stuff like that, if you don't know how to initiate that conversation with your kids, find an Instagram post that subtly talks about, and be like, hey, I saw this and it made me think about blah, blah, blah. And then it starts that conversation. You have these resources, so go out and look for them. I have much more to say, of course, but if you have questions on anything I said, we have Q&A at the end, and or you can reach out. My email's there, my Instagram is there, the hotline, the series. Go ahead, screenshot it if you want this info for later. And that's all I have for you. I just threw out a lot of stuff, but hopefully some of it resonated with you.
Thank you so much, Ava. I appreciate that.
Yeah, of course. Can you still see my screen?
Yep.
Yeah, you
Still
can?
there. There we
How do I
go.
do this? It's gone?
Yeah.
Okay, great.
Okay, May, feel free to jump on in now.
Thank you, thank you. Well, first, thank you to Laura's House for letting me be a panelist with you guys today. And honestly, I actually took the Heart course at UCI as well. I'm currently the marketing director for them too. And I've taken classes with Ava, and every time I love taking classes with Ava because she always speaks about topics I'm like super intrigued about, and things that I feel that a lot of people are afraid to speak about, which is the reason why I'm so happy that I found the Heart program at UCI, because I feel there are a lot of things that people aren't comfortable speaking about, but it's like there's no limits, you know, and so you're free to speak on your opinion, and nobody would, you know, really tell you anything like usually people would, right? And so well, that was a great presentation, Ava. Just a heads up, I don't have a PowerPoint to share with everybody, so you're just gonna look at my face and watch me talk, okay? And listen. But she touched up on a lot of great information, and it's more of like, I would say on the outer realm, I would say. What I'm going to speak about is more on internal and personal, what we can do as individuals for ourselves, because I personally am really into self-development, right? And every day it's like I'm always wanting to reinvent myself. You know, we all have the things that we know that we need to work on. For example, for me, I would say, like, there was a question that showed up on Ava's screen saying like, oh, do I talk to this person respectfully, comfortably. But sometimes I'm like, sometimes I get frustrated. I'm like, you did this and you did that, you know, and I act like the victim, or you know, just try to blame my boyfriend for something, like, well, this happened because you didn't do this, right? But sometimes we forget to step back and reevaluate some things. And so during this COVID, obviously everybody has their own struggles. I know a lot of college students are going through so much. There's like movements that are going on, like make sure Irvine, tell them like we shouldn't pay rent, or if you're having an issue with this, like we should demand not to pay rent, we should demand for these loans to be forgiven. You know, I'm taking online courses now, but I paid for in lecture courses. And so there are so many different categories that are going on in college students, and you know, parents who are losing their jobs, furlough, and all these things. And so I honestly, my experience during this COVID is I actually work with children with autism, and so and with Down syndrome, or who are socially delayed. And I personally have 7 kids who I work with, and because of the COVID, I only work personally with 2 right now. And it's because everybody, you know, I feel obviously this virus is definitely true and it is real, but I feel though, just like Andrew said, the social media has really instilled, I feel that the social media has instilled a lot of fear in us, right? Because of the COVID, like you can't do this, you can't do that. And even though it is true, you need to take your proper precautions, I feel that it's been over like dramatized by the media, you know, like some people are even scared to step 1 foot out the door. It's like, oh, the virus is in the air. You know what I mean? Some people are just in that mentality, and it's not wrong, but it's also because the media has a huge impact in thinking of how we see things, how we look at things, right? And so for me, honestly, during this COVID, I have been very busy. I've been working, I've been doing all of my appointments through Zoom, but I've been speaking to a lot of families, speaking to parents. How can I help them, and with this and that? I've been really busy, busier than I have been normally, than I was in school. I see that sometimes there are just so many things that we don't pay attention to. This virus and this pandemic actually has really opened up my mind to things that I haven't been paying attention to, you know. And obviously I'm still working on my relationship stuff with my family, because it's different, you know. My family's away, I'm in here for college and things like that, but our communication has really been better in the sense of, it's like my family, I've been getting on Zoom calls with my family. Unfortunately, we did lose my grandma in the Philippines. She was a doctor of infectious diseases in the Philippines, and we lost her earlier, you know, a month ago. And you know, we did a rosary with family from my family all over the US, and we were able to make a whole prayer happen through Zoom, you know. And it's like, who would really do that? You know, how many times if this pandemic wasn't here, would we have seen them on Mother's Day? Would we have seen them for this? Probably not, you know. And so I've seen that there's been an increase in communication with family. There's been an increase of checking up on people. There's been an increase of really just Andrew saying well-being, and what Ava was saying, and how can we speak to our kids? How can us as parents, or as daughters, as children to our parents, you know, be better in that sense? And so that was my experience for COVID. I've been busy a lot. I've been busy day and night, like day in and day out. I actually haven't, I know a lot of people maybe with the shelter in place have been inside, but I haven't been inside. I'm actually here at my office, but it's obviously it's you have to have access to it, so there's hardly anybody here. So I am following precautions, everybody, okay? And I do wear a mask when I go to the grocery store. But it's been I've been back to back Zoom calls. I've been back to back with family, friends, on lecture with school as well. Obviously, it is true. Stress does increase with this because there's a loss of income. There's a loss of a lot of things. But I feel that through this, people think that this is a dark time. Through this dark time, you do have to find the light, right? And so we can see what are the things that we can do. Right now, I'm really working on bettering myself. How can I speak better? How can I improve, you know, this and that? I just find things that I was struggling with during school. Right now, I'm taking the time to really get to know myself as well, and get to know who I love, you know, the people who I love, get to know, you know, talk to them. And I know a lot of my friends and family, they express themselves with me like, look, I'm going through this right now, this whole COVID, this and that. I'm like, well, what is something that's going on in your house that you do like? Oh, well, you know, it's crazy because my mom works all the time, but because of this COVID, she's home more, you know. And so we see that there are parents who are with their kids more, and also they're I actually because of Heart, I actually discovered the Higher Ground after school youth services, right? And I actually had the pleasure to volunteer with them for 3 quarters, and they accepted me as an intern to their program. But you think about it, these kids are in school from 7 or 8 a.m. and then they're in an after school program until 6 p.m. That's an 8 a.m. to 6 p.m. while their parents are working maybe 9 a.m. to 5 p.m. That's so many hours in a day that children are missing with their parents during this COVID. Maybe it may be true, like, oh man, the kids and this and that, but when's the next time that you're actually going to be able to get all this time with your family? I like to look at it at that perspective of, you know, a lot of people say, oh, my parents weren't there for me as a kid because they were always working. Well, you know what, right now, maybe a couple of months, they've been at home a lot, but when's the next time you're going to be able to experience time? You know, you can never get time back, right? And so I think that's a really great thing to take a look at and to take into consideration. And that's one thing that I also say, how can parents, caregivers, adults, what should they know when it comes to their children, and how can they best support them, right? Because a lot of them, I know maybe it doesn't pertain to everybody, but because parents work so much, a lot of them don't even know what their children like anymore. They're gone in the morning before they can see their children go to school. They're back, they're tired, they eat dinner, and then it's cycle, right? The cycle that repeats. And so through here, this is a really great opportunity for parents to spend time with their kids. And, you know, even if their kids don't want to spend time with them and they want to be in their room on their cell phone, like Andrew was saying, have one day out of the night, let's have a game night, or let's have one day out of the night, like, okay, everybody's going to have this dinner. You can choose what you want. But what's a mom's favorite dish that you like her to make? Things like that, you know, things of communicate. I really think that communication is key in everything, in a relationship, in a family, in school, in anything, right? In a job, it's key. And I think here during the pandemic, I've seen a huge increase in that. And so that was basically my experience. And for parents, I would say just have an open ear to your kids, and maybe your kids don't want to do chores. I know people are like, yes, I'm home. My kids are home. Go clean up, kids, you know. But at this time, you know, I think it's really important as well for you as parents to take into consideration also your kids are growing, things are changing, they're not used to being around you so much, or vice versa, and it's definitely a change. And so this is something where everybody can choose to really look at it from a different perspective and see what kind of growth and how we can grow in one area, and what take a look at what my family is lacking at this part, or we're really good at this, maybe we can get better at this, right? And so that's something that at this pandemic it has really taught me. But other than that, that's the basis that I really wanted to touch up on. So thank you again, Laura's House, for having me as a panelist, and I really appreciate it.
Okay, Kimberly, I'm going to bat it off to you. Thank you so much, May. That was awesome. The brighter side of COVID. Only at Laura's house will you hear that. That's awesome. Okay, go ahead, Kimberly. Take it away. You know what, Kimberly? We can't hear you. You want to see if you're plugged in? Oh, I think you're on.
I replugged.
There you go. Okay, you're good. You got 10 minutes.
Okay, great. Yeah, so basically, thank you so much to Laura's House. I've sent quite a few of my parents that needed support to your facility. It's just a great facility, and Yanira, Andrew, Ava, and May, thank you so much. I learned quite a bit myself listening. So my history working with parents is funny. I'm just like pretty much the listening ear. So in the past, I've had providers like social services, probation, healthcare agency. And when I've gotten that call from parent, if it's not a crisis or if it's a borderline crisis, I got really actually good with crisis, even though that wasn't my role. It's typically just parents that are fed up. And I'm getting a lot of those right now. And I'm not even working with social services. I'm school-based now. Our program is behavioral health services through schools. And so I'm getting a lot of calls with parents that are just at the end of their rope. And I sound like you, May, a lot. I sound like you a lot with them, and it works. So because I'm only me and I have a heavy caseload, I was underwater Monday and Tuesday. Honestly, I didn't know. I'm glad I'm here. But yeah, it's really giving a lot of hope to parents through this, because they're being stretched beyond belief. Like, they're not supposed to be teachers. They're not supposed to be social workers. They're not supposed to be therapists. They're not supposed to be all these. They're being made to now, and some of them aren't even working. So now there's that. And I luckily work off of a plan of care, or I'd be in the weeds with them. I'd feel like, oh, where do we start? But so when COVID happened, this is what happened to my plans of care, because pretty much the needs completely changed. So, and the strategies were just like 100%. But what did happen, and this is kind of an interesting thing, and I'm really happy about this, but it's also very hard for parents, is they're learning that the reason I was there was because their kids weren't doing well in school. And that's typically the first sign of family stuff. And some of them weren't necessarily tier 3. Some of that means like ready to be like having real needs, like real support. Some of them weren't really ready for me, which was actually kind of good. So whatever learning problems my kiddos were having, they actually got better staying at home with their parent. And working with me and a behavior specialist who was working with kiddos, we were able to really wrap these families, and I'm actually seeing like huge improvements in their learning. Although I've had to tell parents, I've had to give them really important resources like the ABC plan. I love that. You guys know about that. It's great. I love that for parents, because the adult has their plan. The C plan is the child, they have their plan. And the B plan is kind of where you want to be collaborating. So the adult, it looks like this. I want you up by 10. I want your homework done by noon. And that's what it looks like for a parent. But what it looks like for a kid is, hey, I couldn't sleep last night, so I can't get up. And the parent is like, but we have a Zoom call at 8 with your teacher. Like, you don't understand. I even had a parent say she stuck the plugs on his head in bed and just like, not the plugs, sorry, the earphones, and just had the child, like her son, like from bed asleep, just try to wake up to do his class. It was that bad. So these are things where I'm like, that's how it's going to be. Like, try to normalize. I've been trying to normalize parents. Like, that's kind of what we're dealing with. And now, however their behaviors were prior to COVID, what I'm seeing is they're quite a bit more exaggerated. So if this kid was not able to have an open communication with parent before, I'm getting that it's maybe a little more, even though they're living in the same house, and depending on what they're dealing with in the house. So, because I have a lot of families that are overcrowded. I have like basic needs families that have like maybe 25 people at home. And so, you know, that's an issue too. Like, they just are really like stuck. And so a lot of walks. I had to explain to a mom, he's not AWOLing, he's taking a walk. He can do that. Just let him go to the end of the street and come back. But yeah, so those are some of the issues. I'm also getting bad dreams. So if a kiddo had a little bit of like anxiety before, I'm getting a lot of parents telling me like, Johnny's just having these night dreams that are just not even, they're more like terror type dreams. What's working for my parents is something I got from the Whole Brain Child. I have the workbook and I love it, and I show it to them. And I can share it at the end. It's really long, but I love it. It's basically, you're going to set them up for success that night in dreamland. So you're going to tell them a story. You're going to talk about positive affirmations about them. This is what you're going to do at night. With a teenager, it's tricky because they want their alone time at night. Like, they don't want you in their room. They don't want you anywhere near them, really. But I mean, typically, if you can get in there and say, hey, I just want to let you know I love you. If you can slip in a mantra, if you can slip in, so that's what I'm getting. That's what's working for a lot of my parents. Homework issues. Yeah, starting and ending our homework issues. What's working for my parents is let them do the homework kind of when it works for them. It doesn't have to be on a timeline like it looks like for you. It might be at nighttime. It just kind of like relax on when it has to be done. I told you about not waking up, escalating, won't come into the room. I told you about, oh, won't come out of the room. Yeah, that's happening. So a lot of kids are isolating in their rooms, which you think that, you would think in isolation you'd want to get out. But I am getting parents say they just won't come out. They're just in that room, not coming out. What's working for that is basically when they come out, if you're calm, they're less likely to go back in. If they're doing that, it's probably because they need that space from you. And that's working better. But literally doing the infinity sign for the parents on their thigh, the deep breathing squares working for my parents. The learners I told you about. Let's see, ice cream. You guys said something else I wanted to make sure to talk about. Yeah, I guess that's the main points I wanted to talk about with my parents. Those are the main issues I'm getting. So if you guys have questions, you can feel free to ask.
Thank you so much, Kimberly, for weighing in. And I've heard multiple parents say that their children are just locking themselves in their room. And, you know, how can you not take it personal? So, of course, it's going to be a little bit personal, maybe even a little insulting. But the reality is that child is used to, as May was saying, they're used to being with their peers 8 hours at a time. And they've been stripped away from that. And their only peer connection right now is through technology. So they still want to go into that portal and get whatever connection they can during those normal hours that they have honestly been conditioned since 4 years old to do. So it's just a lot of adaptation amongst the adults and the children and the teens. Okay, with that, Andrew, I'm going to go ahead and pitch a question your way, and then I'll be pulling the rest of the panelists in as we go too. So one of the questions was, what about students who are bored and engaging on online dating apps or practicing unsafe online behaviors? So Andrews, what are your thoughts on that?
Yeah, I thank you for bringing that question my way. That's the super interesting question, because it makes me think about a lot of things. The first one being obviously the unsafe behaviors of, like, because when we think about like dating apps online, we think of, you know, the initial interaction with someone online, you know, trying to set up a date and whatnot, and then going forward and like meeting this person, right, or trying to engage in some really unsafe practices with people, you know, during quarantine. You know, that's obviously something that is pretty, it's pretty scary, and also, you know, it's, you know, at the end of the day, pretty irresponsible, right? It's an irresponsible thing to kind of to do that. But something else that I'm thinking about as well simultaneously, because I've seen a couple of videos, really cute videos of people who are going on like online first dates, and I'm like, oh my god, that's super cute. You know, people who are, you know, taking quarantine very seriously and social isolation, and, you know, something that's, you know, so normalized, you know, which is, you know, online dating, and getting acquainted with someone online, and then setting up a day where you have like a cute little date, you know, via Zoom or something like that. And that's something that's super unique, just and some of the ways that people are being kind of unique and strategizing on how to make the most of the situation, just like how May was talking about. Another thing that I'm really thinking about too is just how you know, I want to acknowledge also the importance of dating apps to specific communities, particularly with the LGBTQIA plus community, you know, because this is definitely something that is really significant and important to that community, because this is, you know, it's already as hard as it is to just be social, like in the grand scheme of things, just being in society and normal, quote unquote, society of like walking around and like, you know, I don't know if this person's queer or not. So it's like, you know what I mean? So dating apps made it kind of easier for folks to really interact at that level, and to say, okay, maybe like we can set up a date or something like that. But now obviously it's harder. And with dating apps, they made it a little bit more easier to even develop friendships with someone who you have something in common with, something like sexual orientation. So those are just kind of some of the things that I really thought about from that question. I'm not sure if I necessarily answered it, but there was just like a lot of material that kind of just came immediately to my head when that came up.
No, that's awesome. Thank you, Andrew. And I know you were speaking predominantly to that college age crowd. When it comes to teenagers, of course, those online dating apps can be very, very, very precarious, and you have to be so careful with grooming that goes on. So that is not what he was speaking to.
Right, right. Yeah. Speaking like
when
very.
it comes to teens.
Mhm.
No, not so much for under 18-year-olds. That is not something that would ever be advocated. But most definitely, if you, like you were saying, when it comes to being at home and isolated in place, to be able to kind of broaden that network when you are an adult, that is a fabulous way to do it if you do it safely. Okay, so we do have a question, and it was so broad-based that is something I really encourage you to go ahead, and you can either reach out to Kimberly or reach out to our chat line to be able to kind of get more of a personal feedback, because even Kimberly wrote in that there's a lot there. But I think just the overall premise is that a daughter wants to be able to have a boyfriend over or go over to the boyfriend's house. She doesn't feel comfortable with it because she too wants to be able to shelter in place and protect herself because of an autoimmune deficiency that she has. And so how can a parent communicate to the child when it comes to their own personal safety, as well as kind of the rules in this household? This is what it looks like without being this.
Yeah.
It is a tough balance. So Kimberly, I'm going to bat that to you, and then I would love any of the other panelists to also be able to, when you're done, be able to kind of share what their thoughts on that as well.
Yeah, so my go-to is mentors. I love big brothers and big sisters. I get mentors for my kids right away. Now that's not going to happen because not only are they backlogged, I'm seeing like my clients are waiting like months to get a big brother or big sister. But if you have a family person that's their person, that's where you go, because they know you're sick. They know that you can get sick. You know, they know you have, you know, an underlying health condition. However, it's kind of, I don't know, because I'm not a scientist, but I say it to my parents like this: there's something just not right in that frontal part of their head, because they don't understand consequences. And even though you explain it to them as a parent, it's almost like as if we start talking, that it's like that Peanuts character that goes wah, 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 wah. It's like they just stop. It's like they can't hear us anymore. As soon as we start to tell them something that sounds like a, you know, request or order or, so honestly, I think my go-to is a mentor, a family friend, someone that can give them that, just kind of like what Andrew did just now. Like if someone went to Andrew with a concern like that, he'd be able to set him straight right away in a way that the kid would listen to them easily. You could just tell. You got to get that person for your kid so that when you're having an issue, you can say, look, I want you to talk to my kid about this. And I know you've got the listening of him or her. And I am actually dealing with that right now because I do have a kid home from college right now. And she's like, I'm going to go visit Brett on Saturday. I'm like, oh, no, you're not. So, I mean, it's just hard. And especially when they're like, Tay, because I mean, imagine telling, I've got my bachelor's, I'm going to go see my friend. You know, it's like, no, you're actually not, because it's not the thing to do. But I can't, like I said, if I said that, would she listen to me? No. So I'm going to call her brother, her older brother, who I know is crazy if they have a great relationship, or I'm going to talk to that one person that can get that point across to her. So.
That's awesome. Yanira, I'm going to pitch a question your way. So you had mentioned about maybe it was a very unhealthy, even borderline abusive dating relationship, right, with a teenager. And now they don't see each other, but now the abuse has continued via chat to online apps and stalking of the social media. Why did you like that photo? And why are you hanging out with this person? And you should be able to answer my text messages. There's no excuse now. I know you're not in class, and on and on and on. So what can that person do to best protect themselves in that situation? What are some healthy boundaries they can set? that being said, how can they also pull a parent in if they have a healthy relationship at home, but they're so afraid if they tell the parent's going to say, just break up with them, and they don't want that to happen. So kind of give advice on that in this situation.
Yes, so a few things. We have had that situation in terms of our chat line where people have reached out to our chat line, have had exactly what you just said, Veronica. And, you know, I always break it down, just start off as a conversation, talk about healthy relationships and what those are and what those look like. So we always address trust, respect, and safety. And so I kind of give it to them. What does trust mean? What does respect mean? What does safety mean to you? And then they can identify it. And then I ask, well, do you feel like you have this in your relationship? And that's when they decide yes or no. But when we talk about, if they say yes, then we talk about boundaries, what those boundaries look like. And you mentioned that already, Veronica, what are you comfortable with? What are you not comfortable with? And if you have a healthy relationship, that's the foundation of it. And then you can open up about your concerns and talking about the challenges that may come up and what you're comfortable with, again, and what you're not comfortable with. And you can have that open line of communication that is healthy. On the other hand, if it is unhealthy, that's when we explore more on what that looks like and really what they want, and talking about whether that relationship is something that is beneficial for them and something that they want to continue exploring. So it kind of just depends on their answer too. But that's kind of a quick breakdown for that. For parents, be open and willing to hear. The thing is, if your child goes to you, that's amazing, right? And if they tell you, you know, they're going through this. I know it can be challenging to hear that, you know, your child is in a relationship, but knowing that is great, and then utilizing that and really being that trusting person for them. The thing is, trust, respect, and safety is applied to any type of relationship, and this the same for the relationship that you have with your kiddo. And so having that relationship and just being willing and open to hearing about this, but also knowing your own information. If they bring something up, look it up. What are unhealthy relationships? Look up what the cycle looks like so that you can best support your kiddo through it too.
Thank you. That's awesome. I'm going to wrap it up with a question that I am going to actually kind of ping pong it between the two of you, Ava and May. So a lot of parents are really struggling because when the schools shut down and the shelter in place came into place, a lot of the school districts locked in their grades. So whatever grade they were getting in that quarter prior to the lockdown is what they're going to get in their final report, no matter kind of what work is being done. So talk about difficult to motivate. You guys are still young and not so far removed from that high school experience. How can a parent motivate a child when grades are usually the primary motivator? If that's been taken away, then how can parents motivate kids to continue their online learning? I don't know. Everybody's just looking for some bones and from scraps right now. What would you best suggest?
I had no clue that was the case, that they're like locking the grades. That stresses me out. I'm not a student anymore, but I'm so stressed out just thinking about that. But okay, so motivation outside of the grade. I don't know, or out of the grades. I know that throughout my time in school, high school, there were times that I didn't even care about grades, irrelevant to this whole information of, you know, it stays the same. I just didn't care about grades. But what did tend to motivate me was, you know, my mom asking me questions like, where do you want to be in 5 years? You know, just things like that. Because then even if I don't want to think about 5 years from now, just hearing that makes me kind of think about it a little bit. And I see like, oh, well, the things that I want to do in 5 years, like it probably involves me, you know, being an active learner and learning how to teach myself, or maybe even, again, it depends on the child and how active and involved they are with their family, but maybe being like, as a parent, just being like, oh, I'm going to be working from 2 to 4 p.m. today at the dinner table. Like, do you want to sit with me and do it too? maybe we
You
can.
know, I don't want to cut you off because that is
Oh.
awesome. We
Yeah,
have
yeah.
1 minute and I definitely want to get it to May. No, that was perfect.
Yeah.
And let me just clarify. So the grades are not being decreased. Their students are allowed to increase their grades. So if they were getting a C and they work really hard, then they can push it up to a B. But what's happening is if they're getting a B, they can't be bumped down to that C if that online learning doesn't take place. So May, if you want to just wrap us up with your final short thought on motivating a child or a
I
teen.
would just say, you know what, your grades don't define how smart you are. Your grades don't define who you are. Your grades are just a grade that in that particular standard and course, that's just what you happen to get there. And I would tell you right now, I still got into a UC and I was not the best high school student, but you know, I was great in everything else I did. I just made sure that whatever I did, I put my best into it. I followed the 4 agreements. You can look it up on Google. You know, to be impeccable with your word, never give, you know, like if they're there, I know I have a minute, but look them up on Google. There's 4 agreements. I followed by those. I still live by those till this day. And I tell you now, I don't regret anything that I did before, now, and I, you know, look forward, never look back, look forward. That's all I'm going to tell you.
I love it. And I just want to check in. I was understanding that we were doing this 3 to 4. I was just made aware by one of our panelists that our doc that we were sent actually sent to 4:50, which would mean that we have another hour. But I don't want to keep anybody after 4 if that's not what the original plan was. So can I have you weigh in, Jennifer, on what our stop time is? Jennifer, anyone? It's 4, right, Yanira?
Jen said 4.
Okay, you guys did amazing. I want to give a heartfelt thank you from me personally, definitely from Laura's house to Kimberly, and of course to Andrew and Yanira. They are really just beacons in the Laura's House family, as well as May and Ava. Thank you so much for taking your time and sharing with the community your expertise. You guys are amazing. And with that, to all of our viewers, thank you for tuning in. Please visit the Laura's House website. There you're going to have our 24-hour hotline. You're going to have that chat line, all the resources, that healthy families that you talked about, and everything that you have available. So thank you so much and enjoy the rest of your day, you guys. Bye for now.
Thank you all.
Thank
Thank
you.
you. Bye, everybody.
Bye-bye.
Take
Bye,
care.
everyone.
Bye-bye.